I can't say I got to know that I live with sickle cell probably when I am a matured person. I think I just knew that I live with sickle cell from my parents. They found out, and from the way they've managed me, I realized that I had the condition. And what are those things that used to happen to me back then? I remember that there's a medicine that we used to take every Sunday. That medicine is popularly called Sunday medicine. So, but with my education over time, I realized that it's actually a malaria preventive for me then. And I remember that I used to take some other drugs too, some routine medications too. I think that's the earliest signs that made me know that I live with sickle cell. So over time, I've grown into the condition. All right, so basically, since as a child, when you grew up into something, it didn't come to me as a shock. It's not a rude shock because I practically grew into it. So I wouldn't say I felt bad or I felt any mixed feelings. However, I was able to, what I would say is I actually grew into it and I started talking to people about my condition. For example, sometimes my friend will ask me, okay, while I was in primary school, and say, okay, why didn't we see you last week? Okay, yeah, this is what happened. I have this condition, I was sick, and all that. So that's how I got into telling people about what I live with, which is sickle cell, and that's how it has been for me over the years. Yeah, there are several myths about sickle cell. One of it is that people living with sickle cell don't live long. Yeah, in fact, some people say it's 21 years, some people say it's 40 years, but we have found out over time that people have actually been dusting those records. I'm definitely over 21 years. I'm over 30 now. And I know people who are in their 40s, who are in their 50s, who are in their 60s, who are in their 70s. The oldest person to live with sickle cell died about 2-3 years ago, Mama Laguda by name. She died at 94. So we've seen that myth is actually not true. What we need to know about sickle cell is how do we manage it? What should we do when we have a child who lives with sickle cell? What should we not do when we have a child who lives with sickle cell? So those are the dynamics that we are bringing into the game today. So, and I would say that education has actually grown over time. Well, I would say sickle cell research is just over 100 years. However, over those 100 years, we've been able to see growths. And that is why we can say we now have more people living longer than we used to have in the past. Okay, for example, in the past, we say, from what we know, in Africa, what we don't know, we usually mysticize. So we have issues like Abiku, Ogbanja, and all that. However, we have realized that with education, with medical research, we know that, okay, probably this is one of the reasons why people are dying then, and this is what we could actually do. And so we can say people are living better lives now, and people are living more productive lives now with sickle cell. And one major issue that we had then was malaria, for example. Okay, in those days, in the days of our grandfathers, in the days of our grandmothers who lived over 100 years ago, malaria was predominant. They couldn't take care of themselves. They live in villages where mosquitoes bite children and all of that. That actually cuts the life of children short. Even if you don't, I feel that even if you don't live with sickle cell at that time, and you have such level of mosquito bites and all that, it could actually lead to death. Now, not to talk about people who live with sickle cell. But today, we know that malaria is actually a big issue with people living with sickle cell. So what do? I know that I have to take care of myself, avoid mosquito bite, avoid malaria. And so that is what we also tell people who are growing up like us, people who are also younger than us, try and avoid malaria. And that's how we educate our parents too about sickle cell. All right, so one way that we manage ourselves as people living with sickle cell is, one, water. Water does a lot of magic for people living with sickle cell. Now, what happens to sickle cell is that sickle cell is just like that the shape, what it means is that the shape of their blood cell, the red blood cell, is not looking like it should usually be. So the red blood cell, the usual red blood cell, is actually round in shape, like football. So it can move anywhere. But for people who live with sickle cell, we have the shape in that half crescent, that moon shape, the crescent shape. So it looks like a C. That's how we tell our children, it looks like a C. So it's not easy for that blood cell to flow easily across the body. So, and that would lead to crisis, that could lead to complications. And so what does water do? Water helps the flow, it helps the fluidity of the red blood cells. Apart from water, we talk about routine medications. Like I used to tell my children, I tell them that the same way nobody will tell you to take your food, nobody reminds you to take breakfast, nobody reminds you to take lunch, nobody reminds you to take your dinner. So the same way nobody must remind you to take your routine medications. Routine medications, folic acid, B complex, your malaria preventive, multivitamins and all of that. It's routine. You have to do it religiously. That's what it means, routine. Every day as you wake up, you take it as prescribed. So that's routine medications. And then we also have prescribed medications too, based on whatever is prescribed, maybe based on complications that you have. So those prescriptions must also be taken. So that's how to manage people. And then, of course, food. Food, balanced diet is important. I don't say, okay, this is the way a child living with sickle cell should eat, this is the way a child who does not live with sickle cell should eat. Everybody is supposed to take balanced diet. And that is one way by which you can balance, you can avoid what we call sibling rivalry. Because one thing is that when you are a sibling of a child living with sickle cell, there could be that imbalance in the fact that you tend to want to take care of the child living with sickle cell more than those who don't live with sickle cell, and that can cause rivalry. So, but let everybody know that you are supposed to take balanced diet well. You are supposed to take your proteins, you are supposed to take your carbohydrates, you are supposed to take everything in the right proportion. You are supposed to drink water. Everybody is supposed to take about 2 to 3 liters of water every day. So, those are the kind of things we talk about. So, that's how to manage somebody living with sickle cell. Basically, there is no food that you cannot take as a person living with sickle cell, except if you have what we call allergies to some food. That's basically how to manage a child living with sickle cell. Triggers of crisis are, well, we talk about extreme weather conditions. One, a child living with sickle cell should not live in extremely hot or extremely cold conditions. Let it be serene, let it be calm for the child, let it be conducive for the child. So that's what we talk about when we talk about sickle cell. So one of the triggers is when it is too hot or when it is too cold. So we don't just say, they are not supposed to live in cold, and now you close all your windows, you close everything, you make them wear sweater when the weather is hot. It can actually lead to crisis as well. And when it is cold, make sure you tell them that you are supposed to wear a sweater now, you are supposed to avoid rain. Okay, for example, if it is raining, I don't see why you should step into the rain. Stay under cover, and when the rain stops, you can move to wherever you want to go to. What other triggers do we have? From people to people, malaria is also a major trigger. Like we say, malaria is a major trigger. Then, those are the basic triggers that we have for persons living with sickle cell. So does crisis reduce in later life? Well, genotypes don't change, and that's what we need to educate our people about. Whether you are AA, you are AS, you are AC, you are SS, you are SCC, you are SC. Genotype don't change, except in, okay, we have scientific research now that we now have cures for sickle cell. However, genotypes don't change, and if genotypes don't change, it means that you have to live through whatever genotype you have all your life. And so that means that if I am SS, like I'm SS now, it doesn't change like that. So, does crisis reduce over time? Well, crisis can reduce over time in the sense that you now understand yourself better. The way I behaved when I was 1 year old is different from the way I behaved when I was 10. I was still under my parents. They still had to care for me. But now I am fully grown. I now stay on my own and I take care of myself. I've met doctors, I've spoken to doctors, I've spoken to media, medical practitioners. So I have been able to understudy myself. I know, okay, if I'm seeing these signs, what does it mean? Those are the kind of things that may lead to reduction in crisis. So does it mean that crisis would stop entirely? Maybe not necessarily, but you now understand yourself better. And that is what happens when we say that crisis reduce over time. So people don't necessarily outgrow crisis. Sickle cell complications, we don't outgrow it. However, it can reduce. And why does that reduce? Because of your understanding. So that is why we tell everybody living with sickle cell, seek understanding, seek knowledge. It is what you know that will help you. If you don't know it, you can continue to have crisis as if you are still a 5-year-old and things like that. So it's just a function of education. Okay, what is crisis? Crisis in people living with sickle cell is episodes of pain. And so what does that mean? Like I said earlier, the shapes of the usual blood cell is round, while the shape of the sickle cell is like C, like the crescent moon. So it affects the fluidity of the blood cells. It doesn't flow very well. And so what happens in crisis is that when the sickle cells, when they are flowing and they get to a point and they can't flow any longer, then they keep piling on each other. They keep piling on each other. So at those spots where they pile on each other, the bone joints, the bones, the back, and every other part of the body, when it keeps piling up on each other like that, it means that blood can no longer flow to all those other places. And then we have what we call crisis, that's basically what it's called, pain crisis, or vaso-occlusive crisis, as our doctors will tell us. So that's what happens. It means that the vessels have been blocked. And when the vessels are blocked, crisis can happen, pains can start happening. And that pain can last for as little as hours to as long as days and weeks and months for people. So one of the challenges that we face as people living with sickle cell is stigma, or what we call stigma or bullying. For example, for many of us, some of us are not huge in size. So some of us may get to hear it enough when growing up, smally, all those things that we see when we're still in school. So you get to hear that. That gets to a lot of people. That gets to a lot of people. Why am I growing? Why am I people who are of my age bracket, they are as huge as this, while I'm just like small like that? That gets to a lot of people, and things like that could cause it can cause the child to be withdrawn. It can cause stigma for many people as well. So those are the kind of things that we face in the society. And then another thing is that you live with sickle cell does not make you immune from other challenges that other people face. So for example, the same way a person has to jump bus in Lagos, I also have to jump bus, except I want to stay in the bus stop for long. So the same way that everybody has to queue up when you want to do your admission process in the university, is the same way you have to do it. Nobody is going to give you favorites. Nobody is going to show you any special favor because you live with sickle cell. So those are the kind of things that we face as people living with sickle cell. And it's social, it's part of our society. We just have to keep living with it, but we would look at appeals to government, we look at appeals to schools, we look at appeals to societies and our bodies to help us look at ways by which you can just mitigate the challenges that come with sickle cell. So if you have somebody who lives with sickle cell in your school, what do you do? Okay, engage the parents. Okay, if this happens, what should we do? Should we put a call through? This is what we should do. Okay, then advise other children. You shouldn't show stigma to this person. This is what you should do. They need your care. They need your attention. the same way you can live, they can also live life too, like that. So those are the kind of things that we look at in the society. Okay, for people living with sickle cell, my advice would be, look at your life as half full rather than half empty. When you take a cup and you fill that cup with water, it is your perspective that will determine what you see about the cup. Are you seeing the cup as half full? Are you seeing the cup as half empty? So I would rather see my life as half full rather than half empty. And one thing about sickle cell is that you are not all your life in the hospital. There are some days when you are healthy, you can go around town, you can do everything you want to do. So maximize those periods and let people know you for what you can do. That when this boy is up, when this girl is up, he can actually do anything he wants to do, and he can actually do it well. So those are the kind of things that make people, that give you trust with people, that gives you loyalty with people, that makes people know that you are not giving your condition as an excuse to them. So in the job place, in the school, wherever you find yourself, they see that you are not just giving excuses because you live with sickle cell. They see that you can actually do your job and you can actually do it well. They see that you can actually read and you can actually succeed. They see that you are intelligent. They see that you are resilient. They see that you are adventurous. So once in a while, when crises come, when sickle cell complications come, they can understand. So those are the kind of things I would advise people living with sickle cell like me. I live with sickle cell, and I've lived with sickle cell for over 30 years of my life. It's a testimony to God's grace. It's a testimony to God's mercy, actually. So we also have to keep trusting in God that we are going to live long, we are going to live well, we are going to live full. And I also always say that your life is not just about the doom times. It is also about the boom times. It's also about the blossom times. It's also about the boom times. So celebrate yourself. Celebrate yourself. People are going through things. People are going through issues. People are going through financial challenges. People are going through... We have people who live with other health conditions too. So sickle cell is not just the only thing that exists in the world. So just see sickle cell as an extra baggage that you need to carry along your journey of life. And one thing is that there's a purpose to everything in life. That you live with sickle cell also has a purpose to it. So don't see it as a disadvantage, see it as an advantage. So just keep moving on, one day at a time, one day at a time, one day at a time. You keep getting there, you keep moving forward, you keep moving forward. That's the way to live life, and live life well.